Hi, so I'm Joyelle McSweeney, and I'm talking to you from South Bend, Indiana, my new hometown of almost 10 years now. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you about something that's really important to me about writing poetry, which I've made up a term for, and that term is hyperdiction. Okay, so we all know diction is very important to poetry, but it's also kind of hard to talk about. Diction is the words of the poem, right? And so it's also the most obvious thing to talk about. And when we think about diction, we think about adjectives that we use to describe the words the poem is written in. So we might think the poem uses flowery diction, the poem uses very plain diction, the poem uses a lot of really long words, the poem uses only very short words. The poem seems very elevated. The poem seems very slangy. And we use these adjectives to try to lock in on what we think of as the diction of that poem. And we also know that the diction that the poet chooses can really affect us. It can affect our sense of the tone of the poem. It can affect the mood of the poem, the pace of the poem, how it sounds. I also think that when you read another poet's poem aloud, the diction and the words that they choose creates a kind of mouth feel for that poem, like how that poem feels in your mouth when you read it. If it's super chewy, if it's super smooth, if you fall into the rhythm, or rather, if you trip over their rhythms. All these things are things that diction and diction choices can achieve for that poem. I guess if that's diction, then what I'm interested in is hyperdiction. Like what happens when you deliberately crank your diction all the way up and make it really flashy and exciting for the listener and also kind of thrilling to perform. That's the kind of poetry that really excites me. So what do you do to write with hyperdiction? Well, to write with hyperdiction means to really reach into your brain and pull out all the language that might be hiding there. And I'm talking about not just the language you normally speak in, or maybe you have a certain way that you usually write, but all the language you got, like language from your hometown, from your region, words only your grandma used, words from sports you're interested in, hobbies, communities that you're part of, maybe even some antiquated terms from some hero of yours or some moment in the past. You need to pull all that language up into the conscious part of your brain for when you're writing the poem, and then you'll be writing with hyperdiction. So why might you want to do this? Why might you want to pull up, like if you speak several languages, pull all those languages up. If you speak if you have a certain ethnic background, pull that language up. If there's certain stuff that has to do with foods that you eat, bring that up. Stuff from your job, technical terms, stuff from your majors. Like why? Why write this way? Why write with hyperdiction? Well, I think it sounds awesome, but that's not the only reason to do it. Another reason to do it is because when you think about all these intersecting sources of language that you have at your disposal, you are the only person on this planet that has that particular Venn diagram of language sources to pull from. You are the only person. We each have this totally unique pot of language to pull from, even if we're all speaking English, which we're not all speaking English, but if we happen to all be speaking English in the particular place where you are right now, all these experiences, all of these hobbies, sports, regional background, your family background, your ethnic background, maybe some of the trace of another language that your family speaks or used to be spoken in your neighborhood, all that language is in your brain, and everyone has a little bit different Venn diagram of all those languages and technical terms and slangs and things coming together. And so when you write with hyperdiction, you are writing with your own language, with your own, we say, idiolect. You're the only person who can write that way, and you are truly writing the poems that only you can write. Of anybody on the entire planet, only you have spoken language in this particular way and been influenced by these particular threads. And I want to stress that it's not only about formal languages, like maybe you're lucky enough to be bilingual. It's also about slang. It's also about technical terms, hobbies, sports, like whole rosters of sports teams, all that stuff. You need to pull that language up into your brain, and you need to use it. So how do you do that? Well, there's exercises you can use to consciously build your word bank. And one thing that I do in the classroom is just to simplify things, just start with your hometown, whatever town you identify as your hometown. And we do a series of exercises where we look at things like, I'll just have the students do a guided free write, and I'll ask them to do things like, what are some foods that are only eaten at your hometown? What are some name me 2 streets that you frequently drive on in your hometown and 1 where you have never driven. Tell me about, or just list, not even tell me about, you're just listing, you're just pulling this language out. List some people that you see all the time and 1 person that you never see anymore. List foods you eat there, list sounds you hear at night. Tell me something about the climate. Just pull out all this language, all of these facts, all of these sensations, and make this huge, huge bank of terms. And then we write puzzles, or another formal poem where we're just pulling all of this language up. And that's how we make a poem that has the imprint of the language and the words and the terms that are used only in our hometown. And that's the beginning of growing a hyperdiction. You move from your hometown outwards. Another thing that I do is have people bring up a glossary from anything they care a lot about. So each student has to make 1 glossary that's drawn from like 1 hobby or their job or their favorite sports team or whatever. And you make a glossary of terms, like from the rugby team, rugby terms. And we come in and we trade those. And we do exercises with those. Or sometimes I have them bring in a Wikipedia article about their favorite animal. And then we mash that up with a poet or poem that has very recognizable diction, like Yeats, The Second Coming, something like that, something very elevated. And then the 2 dictions, like a Wikipedia diction and tone, and The Second Coming's diction and tone, mashed up, create some really hilarious poems, but also give us a lot of joy, the joy of sort of moving back and forth between dictions, and the joy of sampling, and the joy of knowing where to splice, which you find as you go. All those are part of writing with hyperdiction. So who are some contemporary poets who are amazing, who write real hyperdiction that you can check out? Obviously, Natasha and Nevada Diggs is one of the most amazing ones with her book Twerk. The poet Monica McClure, Abe Smith, Tracy Morris, Philip Metres, Nick Dembski, Fareed Matuk, Lara Glenham, my friend Lara, sorry to lure you, Lara, Manuel Paul Lopez. These are just some of the poets that are doing amazing thing with hyperdiction, with flashy, variegated diction that really pulls from their backgrounds and from their obsessions too, and from their intellects and from their studies, and pulling all these terms and words together to make the fabric of the poem. Those are some hot poets to check out. And now I'll read you a poem of my own that really uses hyperdiction. So this is from my book, Percussion Grenade, which really makes a lot of hay out of hyperdiction. And this particular poem is part of a play. And in this part of the play, the protagonist, who's kind of a psychopath, goes down into hell to fight with the devil. That's a plot. And while he's down there, he hears about Bradley Manning. So I know Chelsea Manning is now in the world as Chelsea Manning, and she's a totally incredible person. But when I wrote this piece, she was still going by Bradley Manning. So this piece is about her trial as Bradley Manning, and the protagonist hears about this trial. Okay, so here's what happens when this psychopathic teenager is in hell and hears about Bradley Manning, who's in prison during his trial. And he gets really excited, and he wants to go rescue and avenge Bradley Manning, who's still on trial. Here we go. And this is what he says. Bradley Mannequin, my hypnotist double, my hiccuping download, my credit card debt, my event, my embedded chip, my embedded reporter with his lens split wide, and now his legs, and now his lip. Erotically, heroically, scatologically similar, that is like this, a likeness, the boy next door, except. Would that we were Siamese twins and could return to old Siam for a verdant romp and ride on the rickshaw. I'll stitch myself to your chest. You play the rich Chinese lover. I'll play the ingenue in her cabaret shoes in French. I'll play the hand-me-down vamp. Cover my knuckles with rings like eyes, fat diamonds, coal, and I'll give you 1,000 kisses and a smack on the cheek and in the eye. A power vamp, amp to the chest. Defibrillate, resuscitate, advance, zombie music, love-dub. These things are for sale. These things are a hit at the port, down on all fours on the deck. These things on the ship's log are manifest, which can be shipwreck, black box, index, finders keepers, law of the sea. When this you see, remember, no Indian giving, no taking it back, except when you take it from me, Indian, Chinaman, Bradley. No man is an island. Every man must come to port or ride the continental railway or nail ties. You are bleeding from the eye. You're naked at roll call. You've been demoted. You're underground, underfed and listless. You watch your retinas detach, catch the pop fly, sleep inside the pop tab or the synapse, dream of a ballpark, throw up popcorn on the jumbotron, kiss cam, appear, gray gnat, kid lithograph, self-engraving, wax cast, sans toothpaste, sans cotton, totally unrecognizable as an American. I receive your transmission. I develop you in my bath. Red light, I wear the sailor suit I wore in life. Yes, like a Tsarevich. Yes, am I pearl button eyes? Am I ligaments and stretchers like a cat 09? Yes, one for every bullet I caught in CGI. This suit cuts into me, cuts a fine figure, and yes, now I wander the magazines and empty a magazine, yes. Into the bust of, and yes, into the right eye, I punch your ticket, I trash the Louvre, and now I arrive as from the Ballet Russe, from the last century's caboose, and yes, like a Kid Nijinsky, I arrive, I come alive, I contract and percuss, suppurate and pus, like a page boy, I turn the page, like a cancer, I take the stage, like a monk, I see the flashbulb bloom like a nacreous lily, and like the moon in the ocean liner's wake, I foam and rage, and like napalm and cocaine and mercy and mercury, I down can rain. Bradley Manning, I'll find you. I'm coming down the drain.